Hello.
Hi everybody! It's another What We Read video, which means we are talking about some of our recent reads.
That's right.
Recent-ish reads.
Reads that have been recent-ish reads.
Anyway, I'm gonna talk...
The poison for Cusco, the Cusco makes the Cusco poison, that poison.
Anyway, I'm gonna kick things off by talking about a couple of non-fiction reads. So the first one is All Boys Aren't Blue, which is by George M. Johnson.
That's true.
This is...
Sorry.
This is a series of essays that chronicle the author's experiences growing up, both the good and the bad, specifically as a queer black boy. So I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and if anything, I would highly recommend experiencing it that way because the author does a fantastic job narrating their story.
Oh wow.
There are a lot of difficult things tackled in this book, so obviously please check out content warnings before you even pick it up, but I feel like there's something about their honesty and the way that they tell their story that really will have an impact on the reader. There's no shying away from like how hard it was, but there's also an embracing of the good stuff that came along with that. Like, they were very lucky to have a family that was pretty supportive all throughout. They were pretty lucky also to find friends along the way that were, you know, a big part of their lives. And I genuinely think that this is an important piece of literature, at least when it comes to the young adult age group.
Yeah.
I feel like this is very accessible. I think that despite the fact that this is not the kind of book that you can go into without prior knowledge of the tough stuff that is in it, I do think that it is one that people should read if they're emotionally and mentally ready to tackle some of the things that George M. Johnson goes through. They have a great narrative voice, actually, and I think that's actually part of the reason why I enjoyed the audio so much. They were the ones who narrated it, but it also is very clear whether you listen to it or whether you're going to be reading it that their voice really shines through in the prose, and I would highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Even though it was really hard to read at times.
Yeah.
Alright, and the second nonfiction thing that I'm going to talk about is Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex, which is by Angela Chen. This is a nonfiction sort of collection that invites readers to learn more about desire and identity, but looking at it through the perspective of someone who is ace, especially in a world where sexual attraction is such a big, you know, deal in society. I thought it was really interesting. Like, I haven't really looked into asexuality before, but it was interesting just to see this author's take on it and to, you know, see the whole gamut of the spectrum. It is another nonfiction work that combines sort of personal anecdotes from the author, but also interviews with other people on the ace spectrum, as well as some history. And all of that stuff was really interesting to me as someone who's never learned anything about it before. I felt like it was presented in a way that was easy to understand and sort of you could relate to or feel for the people you were, you know, hearing about. I also listened to this one on audiobook. The author is not the one who narrated. I believe it's Natalie Nadas. I could be wrong about that. But I also felt like that worked really well for this particular kind of nonfiction work because of the whole interview and memoir style.
Yeah.
It felt very personal in that sense. So it was really interesting. I feel like it's a good starting point, actually, if you haven't really tackled anything in this realm or about asexuality. So it was very fascinating. I'm glad I read it. It was put on my radar by two people, Literary Heroine on Instagram, so I will link her down below, Autumn, and also my friend Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. So we'll definitely link both down below and definitely be checking out more stuff in this particular, I guess, subgenre of nonfiction, just because I thought it was so interesting.
Awesome.
And informative. Alright, your turn. My turn.
Well, I, for this particular What We Read, have grouped together all of my dystopian sci-fi futuristic stuff. And I'm going to start with, this is a Comixology original. Comixology being what its own thing, has their own sort of comics as well. And this is Snow Angels by Jeff Lemire, I want to say.
Okay. And
Snow Angels is set, you know, in Lord knows which part of the maybe far future. It's in some kind of like very sort of like icy, it's not even tundra, it's Arctic even conditions. Because at least with the tundra you sort of maybe have some greenery every so often, right? But here it's just like it's a trench and it's just ice all over the place.
Fair.
And it centers around a father and two little girls. And you know, they sort of live their lives by a certain creed. There's nothing beyond the trench. They're the
Gotcha.
they're like old ones who whatever, and typical sort of like post-apocalyptic sort of kind of like superstition-y type deal.
Of course.
And things get dicey when they actually have to no choice but to go beyond the ice because of certain dangers that sort of like follow the ancient ones have come.
I gotcha.
And so it's that typical. It's sorry, I'm about to launch it. The Stefan voice from SNL. It's that thing where they have, it's this thing where they have a lot of like mystery behind what is this place. That's really what these sci-fi, like these types of sci-fi stories for me are all about. It's, we know there's a callback to our old world. What is that link, and what is now therefore the fate of these sort of like people that you sort of want to root for them, because they're two sisters, right? And then their dad is sort of like not doing so well because of the escape that they have to do. And then layers of mystery are peeled behind and plot twists sort of in. So I thought, wow, and what a great volume one. Volume one ends on a powerful but a terrible note. And the first few issues of volume 2 are already sort of coming out, right? So in a few months, I should be, hopefully by the end of the year, maybe a little bit next year, we should know what happens in volume 2. So I would definitely follow this series because you want to know what happens to these poor kids. Good God, like a world frozen completely full of ice, and there's weird technology all over the place. Like they see a crane from like our age, it's like, it's a monster, and they're like, no, it's not. Is there magic in here? It's technically electricity, so that's always fun. So Edgeworld by Chuck Austin, who is sort of like famous sort of like writer, producer, director type person. Anyway, I don't know too much of the bio, but whatever acclaim he's gotten definitely shows in these particular books. It's one of those it's one of those things where they're aliens. Sorry, I don't know why I'm launching it this stuff on and like sci-fi dystopia. This book has everything, and it does. Aliens, plagues, cowboys with a very, very dark past that were actually part of some terrible government conspiracy that he's now turned away from, and all of the consequences are now coming back to haunt him. Whatever. So.
Me just being like,
I'm a huge Bill Hader fan. It cuts back and forth between some person looking for bits and pieces of information of that particular era where our main story takes place. So it cuts to like, what about this person? What happened here? Oh, and then some kind of kooky old lady goes, well, I remember back in the day when, you know. And it cuts back to sort of like the present where we have said person who is maybe a person with a dark past, who may be part of like the larger terrible government agency, and now he's sort of like the sheriff of this little backwater planet. Not town, because that's what happens in a space western. One terrible thing happens after the other that reveals both his past and how he plans to run sort of like this future. So it's very desperate. It's very Wild West meets deep space. You know, it's super gory to some extent and science fiction-y crazy to the point where there's some scenes that are so uncomfortable, I want to say. So warning on that. But if that stuff doesn't bother you and you swim in this kind of stuff, which every so often I do, then it's a blast. What a ride this 5-book issue is. I think it's also a Comixology original. It's so good. It's so good. Can't recommend it enough if you're into that kind of thing. So again, trigger warnings, right? There's like heavy violence. It's weird sci-fi stuff. I'm just gonna leave it at that because it's just really disturbing. Like, oh, geez, I guess people like gestate that way in this world, or
maybe
what have you, right? So it's a lot of gore, I guess, a lot of body horror, maybe even. I think you might want to even call it, that's what it's called. So pump the brakes if you're not into that. But if that doesn't bother you, then fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a ride. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, that's a word now. Battle Angel Alita finally was able to finish the entire series. I had requested for the box set of like 5 omnibus volumes, which are actually 10 volumes, and those are the ones available on Comixology as well. But so I have them set on my shelf and I'm sort of reading through everything, and I was able to read all 10 volumes plus the collected stories edition that comes with like the box set all in one go. So Alita is actually found in a scrap heap, just sort of like her torso and her head, and it was a find for her because the person who had found her was this kind of like technician type doctor whatever person. He takes her from the scrap heap, gives her a new body, and realizes that most of her personality and her brain are intact, if not necessarily her memories. And you would think that it would end there. I mean, the movie is such a sanitized version of it. Don't get me wrong, I love the movie. Maybe one of the few people who liked it. Maybe there are more of us out there who like the Battle Angel Alita movie was awesome. But I sincerely enjoyed it. The books are straight up sci-fi anime dystopia. Straight up. Like there is like, oh boy, like there are no boundaries here that we aren't willing to cross. And it really pushes the envelope of tragedy in a sci-fi dystopia world, where if you have technology that is able to preserve human life, how can that possibly be twisted and made terrible? If you have technology that is destructive and terrible, how do we, like, you know, twist that knife a little bit more? And that sort of felt like what Battle Age of Alita was. It was just a lot of knife twisting all the way to the very, very, very end, where things just got to so outlandish that finally, when Alita's saga in that particular series sort of, like, you know, ends, you're like, all right, let's give her that, and then let's leave it. And it's not even one of those things where she suddenly becomes more self-aware. I mean, she does,
kinda,
but you know, not that she, you know, ever thought that she wasn't a robot, or that she, you know, but she always had a personality. She was always more alive and larger than life than most people. So for her to be grappling with these emotions ironically and without any kind of angst, I want to say,
okay,
and how she responds to the terrible things that she has to face and the aftermath of having to face them, is I think what the story is about. I started a rabbit hole of going down, well, what's her backstory, and they started writing that stuff, and I'm sort of like into that right now. But I would recommend this if you like that kind of, like, you know, post, like, apocalyptic steampunky kind of, there's a word for it, cyberpunk type deal.
Okay.
That's what post-apocalyptic steampunk is. Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk, yes.
There we go.
That's it.
You know, and apocalypse not a requirement, but definitely post something.
Not a requirement.
Yeah, it's just super far into the future, and it's just, you know, kind of like, just, you know, it's cyberpunk. But again, Alita's sort of world, at least where she starts off, it's very, very desperate. It's very, very desolate even. And for her to preserve her humanity, like her, you know, who she is I think one of the running themes. It's like, how is the heart of this one being to respond to how terrible the world is?
Gotcha.
And what will she do with the power that she has? And I like that. That's probably the neatest way to describe it that I can think of. Definitely recommend it if that's your cup of tea. And if not, then you know, it's a lot of robots and robot maiming and killing and blowing things up and human experimentation and just terrible, terrible things done to humans. And Alita does not get a break. I'm telling you that much. She does not get any form of break whatsoever. So if you're into that kind of masochistic, like, old Japanese, like, you know, like we're talking about the era in Japan where there's the one Super Sentai. I think it was
Super Sentai.
I forget what it's called in actual Japanese right now, but back home when they dubbed it, it was like Bioman. but she killed one of the members. Imagine, like in the Power Rangers, they just sort of said, we're gonna live our own lives and be adults now, bye. Here it's like, no, she totally died, and she sacrificed her life for the team and had to find Yellow 4 all over again. It's just terrible. So so there.
Okay, the next book that I'm going to talk about is probably going to be a quick one. It's called The Kindness of Strangers, Travel Stories That Make Your Heart Grow, and it's a bunch of different contributors. This was a collection of travel stories where the different people that they tapped share a story of when they experienced the kindness of strangers while they were on whatever journey they were on. It's a lovely concept. I like the idea of it a lot, and it was an interesting collection of anecdotes from a lot of different people, though most of them seem to make adventuring and doing extreme adventures, especially eco-adventures, an aspect of their stories. I did love the sentiment behind this because I do think there is some merit in being open to the fact that people who are not like you can actually be kind to you despite the fact that they don't know anything about you at all. Like, there still is goodness in the world, and that sort of hopefulness to the tale was really heartwarming to read. But it didn't quite resonate with me as much as I wanted, and I think that has a lot to do with the length of the stories. A lot of them were just a few pages long. This is the type of thing where I feel like if you were having a conversation with someone and this was going like around the table and you were all sharing, I feel like that would have had more of an impact. But reading it the way that it's presented in the book, it was good, but it was like not anything super impactful. So this was also another one that I read for the family book club that I do with my sisters and cousin. I think it was just fun because it opened up a lot of discussion about traveling and like encounters with people while we traveled. But other than that, like it was fine. Like, it wasn't anything to write home about. The last book that I'm going to be talking about for this video is Felix Ever After, which is by Kason Callender. And this book was such a surprise. I mean, I should have known that I was going to enjoy it. I've been hearing such great things about it, and you know, it floored me how much I ended up liking this one. In this story, Felix Love is the main character. He has never been in love before, and he fears that this is because of the fact that he has multiple marginalizations. He's black, he's queer, and he's transgender. So on top of the grappling he's doing with his identity and relationships, Felix is also struggling because there is someone anonymous sending him transphobic messages, and the same person has also publicly revealed his dead name and posted pictures of him from prior to his transition. So it sounds like a really heavy story, and in many ways it is, because there's a lot that Felix is going through, obviously, based on that summary. But what I like about it is it's messy, and it feels raw and honest, and it feels so much like Felix is a real person that I knew in real life, and that he is telling me his story the entire time. It just tugged on my heartstrings in so many ways. He felt so relatable. The struggles that Felix was going through, they are very specific struggles, but in terms of the emotions that they elicit, it felt relatable in that sense, and I really appreciated that a lot. I enjoyed the fact that the author did not shy away from giving us, you know, the messiness of how Felix emotionally responds to certain things or his experiences. I love that because it made the story feel even more real and more true to what would happen in real life as well. I love that it was still heartwarming and hopeful. There was still like a note of that throughout the story, which also felt really real to me, because life is like that. Like, it is that messy and it can be that difficult, but there are also still good things every now and again that can surprise you sometimes, and Felix definitely goes through that in the story. This is my first work by Case and Calendar. This will not be my last time with their work, because it was just phenomenal and it really hit me in the heart in all of the best ways, and it's definitely one of the best books that I've read this year, and I can see why everyone loved it when they read it last year, and I will be another one of those people who's like, you should definitely be checking this one out. So if anything, if you take away anything from this video, it's definitely read Felix Ever After, because that book was delightful. I think we have finally come to the end of this What We Read video.
Yes, we have.
Again, if you have thoughts, feelings, reactions to any of the books that we talked about, or questions even about any of the books that we talked about, feel free to leave a comment down below. For more content from us, like this video, subscribe to the channel, check out the links down below, and we'll see you guys with a new video soon. Bye!